Fintech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Hello and welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with Fintech leaders for a bit of a chat. I've got a really special guest with me today, and I say special because back in the early days of Fintech Chatter, when I was recording from a little walk-in wardrobe, one of the first guests that came on the show was Sam Zheng, and I finally get to record with him in person. Sam from Curious Thing, welcome back to Fintech Chatter.
Thank you very much, mate. It's great to come back to this. I do remember when we were recording last time was like the start of COVID, and we were doing that through Zoom.
Yeah, we were. Now, I've brought you back at seems like an opportune moment. You're Mr. Popular, probably getting podcast requests and interview requests from media at least 10 times a day.
Not really.
Do you want to explain to our supporters a little bit about why you're so popular right now?
Firstly, I'm not that popular, but I do have more like interview requests or podcast invitations. The main reason is because everyone is talking about AI. So, now I think last time I saw the stats was like 30 or 40% of the people are using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, what does this whole generative AI mean to us? And then they started looking for people who's actually working in the AI field.
Yeah.
Somehow people find me, but like definitely not 10 people request an interview every day. I wouldn't love it as well. I think, we are essentially a business. We are a builder. We are not really there to share all the opinions because we are just a subset of the whole AI field. Yeah.
And look, that is one of the reasons why I was so keen to get you on the show, because you're not only have you been around the space, for such a long time, but you're also one of the most pragmatic, kind of insightful people that I know in the AI space, who is also, I think very clear about possibilities, limitations, the technology, its applications, and also you've lived it. This is your now second business. And I remember back in 2016 when we kind of had the, not the first AI kind of hype cycle in the media, but it was certainly kind of one of the most recent ones. And in that period as well, you kind of, were really, one of the most, I think, visible people, and certainly with Hyperana, one of the most visible businesses in the AI space here in Oz. But before we talk about AI and the whole ChatGPT thing and all of that stuff, which I'm sure you're sick of talking about, what I really want to talk about is your journey as a founder and kind of, maybe take me back to those kind of Hyperana days, and, we'll talk about that. But first of all, I'm really keen to understand a bit more about where you're at with Curious Thing, because when we last spoke, there were some use cases that you were looking at, and understand that the business has evolved a bit from then.
Absolutely. Maybe a very quick intro about myself.
Yeah.
So my background was actually statistician. So I was trained as a statistician. I was working as actuary for many years for insurance companies. About 8 years ago, I started the first AI company called Hyperana. I was a CTO co-founder. The company is basically AI for business intelligence.
Yeah.
And current company is called Curious Thing. It's my second AI startup. Now I'm the CEO co-founder, and I'm running the business side. So I have to say I've seen both the tech side and the business side of running the AI company. Though now what we are doing is totally different. We do, customer communication. So we automate phone calls. I would say the biggest learning I've had in the past few years is basically really just try to work with people's, I would say, mindset change.
Yeah.
Or the paradigm shift, so that you can acknowledge what's needed in the market. One thing I want to say is today what's needed and what's kind of seen as acceptable in the market is totally different to 5 years ago or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say are those key differences then, Sam?
So I think maybe I'll take a step back, right? Like I think for individual customers, when Siri was released, a lot of people were like, oh, this is cool. But like really, if I invite everyone to think about it, it's like cool in a way that people think it's a toy.
Yeah.
Not many people use that as like, oh, it's very productive.
I still remember the ad, right? The person having their morning run and Siri put me there. Right? The reality is, right now, kind of what is it, 13 years later or 12 years later from Siri? My kids just argue with it and try and ask it questions that it can't answer.
Exactly. I think, Siri is a good introduction of this kind of experience, but back then it's a toy.
Yeah.
Now I can't say it's still a toy, but to lots of people it's still a toy, right? I use it for very simple tasks like, hey, a stopwatch, or hey, I've got something in the oven, do a 20 minutes timer.
That's exactly what I use it for as well.
Exactly. But like, actually, it's a journey for people to truly realize what it should be doing and what it shouldn't be doing. But one thing I realized is in the past few years, the top thing is people no longer see this as a toy, especially in the B2B field. And people no longer see this as, oh, let's run an experiment. I think most of the businesses we work with or we speak with, they have a clear view regarding where they want the AI to play a role and what kind of value, especially quantitative value, they want to see out of this, which never happened before. That's the biggest shift, I would say,
right?
In the past few years.
So these, we've got this, this kind of two worlds as I see it, right? There's the kind of hype world where you've got the, say this in inverted commas, thought leaders, consultants who are shilling the latest kind of hype cycle. And then you've got the real commercial world where, there's pragmatism around not only solving real problems, but then the regulatory kind of landscape that surrounds that as well. Your journey through kind of hyper and now curious thing, where are you seeing, the kind of the real, use cases for the technology?
Absolutely. I can only speak for the fields I play.
Yeah.
Currently Curious Thing does phone call automation. So we don't do cold calling, by the way. We only do, business to consumer communication where the business already know the consumer. And we do information delivery. We do reminder. We do appointment management. Just imagine you call a business after hours, the AI will answer the call. And it can help with some of the simple tasks like, hey, let's reschedule the appointment. Oh, you're going to cancel. Okay, I'll do that for you. Or you receive a phone call saying, hey, you've got an appointment here tomorrow. You need to prepare this information. Let me ask you some simple questions to make sure that you are ready for tomorrow. We do lots of that. We mainly focus on financial services and healthcare these days. I think the biggest change in terms of for the business world, where we are compared to for this field where it was, say 5 years ago, the main difference is the technology is more mature. So what it can cover, to be very frank, it can't cover everything, right? For complex conversation, important conversation requires, I would say, massive empathy. I don't use AI to do that. Yeah. But now AI can do more, more complex transactions. Hey, there's a payment you have missed. Let me check what is the next step, et cetera, et cetera. All of this can be done, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the technology part of, but also why people are more ready than before is also because, the AI technology itself is actually able to prove the value. Say in the past, it's let's run the experiment, let's do a chatbot. And the chatbot is usually saying, hey, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you please say that again? I'm pretty sure everyone has experienced a version of that. Now the chance of that happening is lower and lower. Yeah. And also I think it's because business builders or AI business builders like me, we are getting more pragmatic. And we don't go in and try to sell the AI concept anymore. We go in and try to say, hey, look, it's AI. It's a tool. Just like people were trying to sell you software. Yeah. Let's solve some problems. Yeah. Where you can actually make more money or save more money.
Yeah. So when you were last on the podcast, you took me through, as we finished recording, you took me through the technology at the time. And I remember you calling your mobile and the AI did an interview with me for, I think, an engineering job or a developer job. And I finished that and I was like, man, you're going to put Hayes out of business because it was so, sophisticated, and you were saying, oh, well, it can't do empathy and it can't ask complex questions, but it was pretty complex. Some of the things that it was asking and how it was taking those answers. And then, the next follow-on questions, I think, was the thing that really struck me was, how that worked. How have you kind of now seen that technology evolve now that we're on 3 years later?
Yeah, absolutely. So, firstly, we no longer do recruitment. I
Hayes
still
will be happy, eh?
Yeah, well,
recruiters everywhere breathing a sigh of relief.
I still feel we have built a really, really cool product, super cool. But one important thing I learned is like being cool doesn't mean much.
Yeah.
And, I still remember when we were talking that I was interviewing and asking, hey, do you know how to code in Python? And people say, yeah, I do. Then I will ask some detailed question, not just about Python, but also about certain framework. So one thing I learned through that journey, you're not saying AI doing job interview is the wrong business, but it's not the business we could actually make it work. Because back then, I think the biggest challenge we had was like lots of our clients or people we talk to, they find it so cool, but it's quite difficult to justify the value easily within the business. While 1 year after that, we realized for certain businesses, we can just quickly address more important problems. Like some people, they really want to reach, they couldn't.
Yeah.
Some people, they really have to reach today, not next week, they couldn't.
Yeah.
No matter how many people you hire in call center or BPO, or sometimes people call you after hours, you really can help them, but you couldn't. So second day morning, many people are calling at 9 a.m., all of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the shift of my side from my side. But technology-wise, I would say compared to 3 years ago, large language model as a thing is now like now everyone knows it's large language model. Back then we were like, oh, we use BERT, it's a large language model, pre-trained model. Many people would ask us, what is that? Yeah. So I'm not saying because we use other people's large language model, but we actually started quite early. Yeah. So now I think, it's more mature and, more people understand that this new pattern of building software is actually the future.
Yeah. I remember back in 2012 and I read an article about some things that IBM was doing around not only AI, but also distributed workforces. And I just remember my second kid was on the way. And I thought, wow, like you're going to have to think quickly about how you're going to navigate the rest of your career because you're completely irrelevant when all of this happens. So that was 11 years ago. And I thought we would have got there sooner, but I feel like we're a lot closer to kind of that day coming than perhaps I'd like. And I think a lot of people might like as well. What's your sense as to the kind of disruptive impacts on jobs and kind of people's careers that, the type of technology that you're talking about, generative AI is kind of another question, another topic, but the LLM stuff, what do you kind of impact do you see that having on the workforce and, overall productivity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, I'm very positive about what human beings like us are capable of. Yeah. So to me, firstly, I actually went through my own learning when I saw ChatGPT. I was like, oh, it's just a good interface for content creation. Yeah. I used it. It was like, cool. You can, correct my emails, grammar, spelling errors, which is very helpful because English is my second language. But then after 1 month, I started reading how other people are using this, like from API level. Then I realized how big it is. Yeah. So I know there were people talking about this as, it's a new iPhone moment. I feel it's the new internet. That's my kind of like a personal opinion. I think it's a new internet. I think the key thing we all need to think about is like now it's almost impossible for any of us to imagine the work life without internet.
Yeah.
Right. And also now it's quite difficult for you or for me to say, hey, what did the internet mean to the workforce back then? Because people didn't know, right? It evolves, but at the same time, it's creating the new infrastructure. I think that's how big it is. But at the same time, think about how many jobs were created, and think about how many jobs were recreated and redefined.
Yeah.
So to me, I think there's no clear answer in terms of like, it will disrupt this particular type of job. This will actually make this type of job more important. I don't really think I know the answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a big shift for all of us to redefine what we do. For example, content creation. Maybe I believe content creation will be even more important, not less.
Yeah.
Though Midjourney looks scary, right? Like when it can create like the really, really cool arts. But I think the focus might be different.
Yeah.
And, compared to before. So that's how I see it. So it's more like everyone will have to work in a different way.
It's interesting you make that point, right? Because you said something earlier about the distinction that you had to make as a founder and a business owner was not to just focus on what was cool, but solving a real problem.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel, with generative AI, that's like the distinction to be made, right? It's like, something might look cool, but as a kind of species, right? Everything that we've become, the DNA that's kind of within our DNA, right? It's all been about building and creating. And all of a sudden, if we outsource creativity, what impact does that have on us as a civilization and society when it's actually been a source of joy, inspiration, kind of all of these things that, as a species have kind of, molded us to who we are today. But it's such a fascinating kind of outlook and question to ponder.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. I did talk to one artist about her opinion regarding, creativity and, she's a painter. And, she was like, I'm neutral to positive about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And what she mentioned was basically saying, hey, think about it, right? Like in the past, lots of things we call it creativity now. It's no longer considered, creativity. And lots of things we do today. Think about it. Lots of like conceptual arts today.
Yeah.
200, 300 years ago, or maybe 500 years ago, people would be like, hey, it's just some lines and shapes.
Yeah.
Why is that art? So I think one thing, if we really think ourselves, is like, this whole thing can generate certain things given the context or given the prompt.
Yeah.
That might give us a new way to think about creativity, which is fundamentally, hey, it's not about, hey, you can do this particular color or you can come up with two concepts together, but maybe redefine what's a concept. I don't know. I'm not an artist, but this is how I think about it. That's why I was telling you, though I don't know how this whole thing will go towards, but I do feel very positive about what the opportunities it's going to create for us.
So interestingly, according to some research that I found online last week, the greatest use so far of ChatGPT in the workplace has been people doing their resumes. So, clearly, people are worried about the disruption in their current job and are using, the very thing that promises to put them out of a job to find a new one.
Yeah.
I thought it was a kind of a nice level of irony in that stat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about why people do that. It's because people feel comfortable that it will find all the obvious mistakes.
Yeah.
But people wouldn't say, hey, can you please write a resume for me? It's usually like, can you please correct my resume based on the information I've provided? So I think, I don't know, like next year after, this whole generative AI, large language model thing, I think will become more clear regarding the impact it will give us. I think today what we see, or ChatGPT itself, is just a start.
So one of the cool things that I've introduced with the podcast, even though we've done hundreds of shows now, is that my previous guest gets to ask the next guest a question, right? And they had a question for you specifically, and this is from Anthony Jones at Visa. And he wanted to understand or get your thoughts on whether you could see generative AI being as impactful on e-commerce as e-commerce was on traditional retail.
Firstly, I'm not e-commerce expert. I'm just a heavy user of e-commerce because we basically buy everything online.
Yeah.
So that's a limitation of my knowledge and experience. But based on that, my answer would be yes. I'll give you an example, right? Like I know for lots of e-commerce business, one of the biggest things is writing contents.
Yeah.
So they can be found, from the channel, say for example, Amazon. And so you have the right keyword for people to actually, find you. With generative, like they spend lots and lots of money on that. It's just one example I knew.
Yeah.
And with the whole generative AI, I think it's basically a solved problem to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Then the key question is, if that is the case, what is left, right? Like you still need to do the important physical stuff, right? Your logistics.
Yeah.
Who's gonna ship the product.
Yeah.
But like think about the other part, which is the most of the back office stuff. I think, to a certain extent, it can be using generative AI to help. But is that big enough? I don't know. But I think yes.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you about your journey as well, because I think one of the most distinctive things about your experience and background is if I look at, what probably the biggest challenge is for any early stage startup, it's usually finding a CTO founder. And you've been a CTO founder, you're now a CEO founder.
Yeah.
What's your kind of view on, one, I guess the importance of having a CTO founder and whether it is necessary? And if it is, how do you then go about finding one and finding the right person?
Yeah. Actually, I might not be the best person to answer that question.
Mate, you absolutely are the best person.
No, because I never had this issue myself.
Yeah.
So I think the best way to learn certain things, like basically you fuck up once or twice, then you really learn. When I was doing the first company, I started the business with my colleague, right? I was a CTO co-founder. Then for the second company, we started the whole company. My CTO co-founder, myself, and another co-founder, we three started the business together. So maybe I'll share a little bit regarding how I view the CTO co-founder and the role of the CTO co-founder. So now I have a really, really smart CTO co-founder. Like his name is Han. He's PhD in machine learning, natural language processing. We got to know each other like I think 1 or 2 years before I do this. And when we decided, when David and I, my other co-founder, and I decided to do this, we realized, we need someone who's deep in the natural language processing. And we started looking into our network. And that's how I was like, hey, Han, do you want to consider leaving your job and do this with us? So we didn't go through a journey of let's kind of like go talk to everyone and hire a CTO co-founder because it's through existing connection.
Yeah.
Also, I was lucky because I knew quite many, head of engineering, engineers and data scientists. But back then, if you ask me, hey, say I wanted to be the CTO to hire or find someone who's going to do the commercial side, that would be challenging for me. I think the question regarding whether someone needs a CTO co-founder, I think depends on the business you are building. Yeah. If you want to build something in deep tech that is complex, it requires lots of, time to do R&D, product research, and you might need a CTO co-founder. You need someone who's going to run that part of the business. But if you are a good kind of like a CEO or CTO who can do the job already, maybe that's not the case. However, if you don't understand the engineering side of the work or the product development side of the work, that will be challenging. But there are other types of business, right? Which is like, it's not like the technology complexity. There are existing patterns of building those types of platforms. Say I'm going to start an e-commerce. Maybe having a CTO co-founder will be great, don't take me wrong, but it's not as necessary or as important as the first example I was sharing. So it really depends on what you're doing. Just like, hiring, right? Depends on what kind of a business you are, what you need, the problem you are facing, you might make a different hiring decision. Finding a co-founder is just, the first step of hiring. That's how I see it.
Now, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your own development journey. My background, I used to recruit for banks and insurers, recruit across risk, actuarial, right? I've been on, not exactly the same journey as you, but an observer of, having recruited in that space and now doing a lot of work in the startup space and having most of my network being founders. Actually, to CTO to then CEO is an extreme journey, right? Like it is, right? It's kind of, you're going from one end of the spectrum to the other. And I really wanted to understand from you, like, how did you, what have you, used to help you develop the skills that you need to be a CTO? Because I absolutely, other than the decision-making and analysis side, you've then got the whole, please forgive me, actuaries, right? But the whole kind of interpersonal side, empathy, the kind of, they're traits that tend not to be synonymous with that field. How have you gone on that journey of kind of developing those skills, or what people call the softer skills?
I think I'm still developing that. I can't say I'm there. Like, I'm still learning how to be a good CEO. I think compared to 4 years ago or 6 years ago, I'm definitely better. This is how I see it, right? Like, you will never be ready. That's the first thing I want to say, right?
A bit like parenthood, right?
It's no way you will be like, hey, I'm ready, right? Most of the fun part of doing a startup or joining a startup is actually that, hey, you kind of feel you will be there. You kind of feel you'll be ready. But the reality is you will never be 100% ready. When you are ready, say I'm a really, really good head of engineering, bigger challenge will come to you and you might be promoted to CTO. I think that's how I see it. It's like, don't go find the role you feel, okay, I can do. Go find the role that will give you the challenge so you can learn. Like, I learned most of my engineering skills from my engineers when I was a CTO. I had some programming skill, but I wouldn't say I'm a very good engineer, right? Because I learned everything from doing things. I never went through proper engineering education. And at the same time, when I started working as a CEO co-founder, I have to learn lots of go-to-market stuff, from my team or from my peers, from other founders. I think that's of course, it's painful, but that's also the fun part of being a founder. So I personally don't believe in pre-learning, which is like, hey, I read all the books.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to do that. You're going to miss your timing if that's the way you work.
How do you then get that, kind of fine balance between, because in this type of business, this type of environment, there's not much error or room for error. You can make a mistake, but you can't make too many, right? And so, there's this fine line between commercial pragmatism and, learning and kind of, and also learning to the point where you're competent enough to actually, make sure that you're getting the results that you need.
Absolutely. I think maybe I'll share a little bit more regarding the topic I just talked about, right? Don't do the job you have no clue about, right? That's wrong, right? I've got no idea how to program, but I will be the CTO. Then, you can't really even distinguish who's a good engineer, who is not. But like, you have some core skills, but some other skills are missing, which is fine. Then first they analyze what you are good at, right? If you want to be good at a job or building a company, at least you need to really understand the why you part, which is like, okay, this company is going to be successful. I will be the CEO co-founder. The why me part is because I understand the industry. I experienced the problem myself. I know how to do go-to-market, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know how to hire. I don't know how to run an engineering team, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Identify that.
Yeah.
Then use other ways to mitigate the part you were not good at. At the same time, for the part you were not good at, but it's the important part of your role, just learn that as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Talk to other people who are known to be like the best in that particular problem space. Ask them. So that's kind of how I feel. But if you've never sold anything, you've never even talked to people about commercial model, then you can't be the head of sales, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right? But if you kind of were there, but you feel you were missing one or two pieces, it's okay.
Yeah.
You can start. That's how I see it.
It's really interesting you share that, Sam, because one of the issues that I've found in my field, which is talent, right, is that we've looked at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of businesses, and the founding teams, less than 1%, have any expertise in recruitment, HR, talent, right?
Yeah.
Yet it seems to be the one area that everybody feels, hey, well, I can master that and I can be great at that.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, we got all this messaging about talent as my number one, second problem, or my number one problem, and there's a talent shortage, and where are all these people? And my kind of question is, maybe the talent shortage isn't external, but perhaps there's a skill shortage internally, which is yourself, which you're kind of trying to take on something that you don't actually have the experience, insight, and expertise to do, and it's actually really complex, right? It's like one of the most I don't need to tell you, right? People is probably the most complex part of your business.
I totally agree. I think, I'll put it this way, in business, right, certain things make you feel it's complex, right?
Yeah.
If you've never, done any coding, you feel building or programming is complex, or you might feel sales is complex. At the same time, some people feel customer support is easy. I can imagine I've been supported. Some people might feel recruitment or hiring is easy.
Yeah.
Because it's I pay you. How difficult would that be? I think that's the kind of where the bias is coming from.
Yeah.
And I think for, founders or business leaders, it's important to address those bias, right? Appreciate the things you didn't know or you don't know. Because that's the first step of truly solve that problem. Hey, I thought customer support is easy, but maybe it's not, right? How do you handle, different scenarios? How do you build a process? And how do you make sure that when your number of customers grow by 10 times, you don't have to hire another 10 people? All of this is, I think it's science and arts.
Yeah.
It's just, but for some people, including me a few years ago, I felt, doesn't feel difficult.
Yeah.
It's definitely not difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's a wrong mindset.
Yeah. So I've got a hypothesis that I think in the next 5 years, we could potentially be looking at the first ever one-person, $1 billion revenue business.
I don't know. Which field do you think that business will be at? Fintech?
No, I don't think fintech. I think it's too heavily regulated. But I think that if you look at certainly what we're seeing in marketing, and the kind of rise of the influencer, and you look at, some of the revenue numbers that, like Mr. Beast, so I would say marketing, entertainment, I think are going to be, if anything, I think entertainment is going to be the biggest field because, again, I might sound cynical, but my experience is that if AI is going to free people up to do more creative stuff, the reality is we're going to sit and, be distracted by mindless entertainment, right? And binge watch Netflix or whatever it might be. So I think that's going to go absolutely, if it has gone parabolic in the last decade, I think it's going to 10x even more. So I kind of truly believe that, entertainment and, that field it's very much probably going to be the biggest boom.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't watch enough TV to to give a comment.
Right. How old are you? How old is you? Is it boy or
Yeah, it's boy. It's
yeah.
boy.
How old is your boy now?
1 year old.
Right.
1 year old.
Right.
So that's
my,
a reason.
My kids are now 12 and 10,
Yeah.
and I can tell you when I see the world through their eyes,
Yeah.
it's crazy, right?
Yeah,
It's,
absolutely. Absolutely. What I hear is like many people, like, I would say the newer generation, right? People like maybe under 18, what they experience and what they think the human machine interaction should be is very different to us. So, but I think the future is going to be very good.
Yeah.
And I also feel there's one thing you said, I personally don't agree. I think AI will actually make us more busy, not less.
Why and why so?
The reason is because think about it, right? Like in the past, AI is like not something like, it's a new rule. There's no new rule, right? AI is just a new form of automation. In the past, all forms of automation make human more busy, not less. That's my very simple kind of reasoning.
It's interesting you say that, because all the kind of indicators around productivity suggest that productivity is decreased as technology has got better. Do you think that's because of distraction rather than?
No, I think productivity will increase, but demand in other stuff will even increase further. Right? Once we had light, we have more demand for entertainment, especially entertainment at night.
Yeah.
When we can, build a car within 3 days, not like 3 months, more people want a car.
Yeah.
Then more people want different types of car. People want sports car.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be, what this new form of automation bring to us. So, yeah.
Final question. So a lot of other founders listen to this show. What ways do you think that businesses can adopt AI in a pragmatic way today that can help them navigate what is a pretty tricky period? We're all worrying about cash runway.
Yeah.
Access to capital is getting more difficult. Unfortunately, I think, for a lot of businesses to make it through, they're going to have to look at cutting costs.
Yeah.
What are some of the kind of practical AI implementations that you can think of that you would recommend people look at?
The first version of recommendation I can give is like you would consider using Curious Thing to help you with the communication, but that's not legitimate.
I am so good at getting in the plugs for people in a seamless way.
Yeah, but that's not the real thing, right? Like, I think the number one thing is like forget about AI. Come back and really focus on.
Let's kind of touch on that point, because outsourced and BPO is a expensive, difficult, cumbersome process, right?
Absolutely.
It's got benefits, but it also has challenges.
Yeah, let me finish that part, right? So I think one thing, like the clients, we work with lots of clients, the clients find using us most successful or in the most kind of like highest ROI way is actually those people who started with their business problem. Not started with, hey, we want to use AI to cut cost. How do I use you? So usually, right, our clients who's like, we love working with you. They started with, hey, we really want to reach out to this customer when they miss a certain thing.
Yeah.
Currently, I can't hire another 20 people. Can automation help me?
Yeah.
So that's the thing, right? Like, we'd love to work with everyone in the market, but the reality is like some customers, they will benefit from working with us. Some customers, they won't.
Yeah.
The same thing. Some people will benefit from using AI, some people won't.
Yeah.
Start with your most painful problem, analyze that, and identify whether it's a scalability issue, automation issue. Then you will automatically realize whether AI is your solution or not. But the good thing is, for most of the businesses, if you pragmatically look into your own problems, you will find certain problems where AI can really help you. So don't start with AI.
Yeah.
Start with your own problems. Then you might realize actually certain problem, AI is the best and the perfect solution.
Which I think is probably the biggest cause of the issues, right? And the problems that we're inevitably going to see over the next 2-3 years and we've seen it with crypto and blockchain and every other kind of, technology evolution, is, you get consultants all going out advising their clients. The irony is now I don't even think they're making the pitch decks. I think they're just saying ChatGPT. Generate me a pitch deck for how a big four bank can adopt AI. As you pointed out, everybody's asking how do we use ChatGPT into the business, when it's actually the wrong question to be asking.
Absolutely. It's not like it's a magic, right? It's the next generation automation tool. What does it automate? It's subject to the business and business context.
Sam, it's been fantastic to catch up with you in real life and talk about what is a subject I could talk about for weeks on end.
Likewise. Thank you for having me again.
Before you head off, where can people find out more about Curious Thing?
Just check our website. If you search for Curious Thing on Google, you will find us. If you search for Voice AI, we are ranked number 1 organically in Australia and New Zealand. You will also find us.
And if people want to engage you for your SEO expertise, where do they go?
It's in-house. It's in-house. And don't try that.
And what's the best way for people to follow you? You're on socials?
LinkedIn. I use Twitter, but I usually just see what other people are talking about. I don't really tweet that much, so LinkedIn is the best.
Great. Well, Sam, it's been fantastic to have you with us.
Thank you very much, mate, for having me again.
As always, folks, you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're new to the show, make sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcast player. And if you can, leave us a review. It really helps me promote great founders like Sam. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. It really does mean a lot. And until the next episode, keep well. Tier 1 People, leaders in executive search for fintech and the digital economy. We'll help you bring in world-changing leadership talent to build world-changing ventures. And you can find us at tier1people.com.